At that time, it was the late Qing dynasty. The imperial court was corrupt beyond measure. Western powers continued to invade one after another. Some common people could no longer bear the oppression. They joined the White Lotus Sect, which aimed to support the Qing and destroy the foreigners. Rumor has it that all members of the White Lotus Sect possessed the protective divine skill bestowed by the great Emperor Zhenwu, able to be impervious to swords and spears, unharmed by water and fire. Therefore, the White Lotus followers were fearless among the people. They regarded foreigners as demons and evil spirits, fiercely destroying the foreign powers' spheres of influence. That day, the followers in Guangzhou city were attacking the Tongwen Guan, which taught Western languages. Coincidentally, Wong Fei-hung and his two companions were passing by. They learned that many children were still studying inside. Without hesitation, they rushed to the Tongwen Guan to rescue the people. Unexpectedly, when they arrived, only a pile of corpses remained on the ground. However, fortunately, a group of children had hidden under the tables in advance. They escaped unscathed. Seeing this, Wong Fei-hung and his companions quickly rescued the children from the Tongwen Guan and took them to a guest house to rest. However, the innkeeper, fearing that this incident might affect his business, kept pleading with Wong Fei-hung to arrange for the children to be taken elsewhere. Seeing the innkeeper kneeling and praying, Wong Fei-hung could not force him. He could only take the children away from the inn and then seek help from the local yamen, government office. Coincidentally, today, the magistrate on duty was Lord Nalin Yuanshu. Upon hearing that the civil court commander Wong Fei-hung was visiting, Nalin Yuanshu was suddenly interested in testing his skills and immediately kicked a wooden stick toward Wong Fei-hung, then engaged in a fight. At first, Wong Fei-hung was confused. He only defended himself, but seeing Nalin Yuanshu's fierce four-gate staff techniques, he had no intention of stopping. He could only fight back with Shaolin staff techniques. Only after Nalin Yuanshu tested that their skills were evenly matched did they finally end the duel in a draw. After exchanging a few words, Wong Fei-hung explained his purpose. Unexpectedly, when Nalin Yuanshu heard it was related to the White Lotus Sect, he tactfully refused, citing insufficient manpower at the yamen. This left Wong Fei-hung speechless. He also realized that, although the court disapproved of the White Lotus Sect causing trouble everywhere, in fact, their stance was aligned. Both sides did not want foreigners to interfere in their affairs. Therefore, regarding the White Lotus Sect's various actions to suppress foreigners, Nalin Yuanshu outwardly opposed them, but secretly, he did not interfere much. Understanding the current situation, Wong Fei-hung, helpless, could only take the children to seek refuge at the foreign consulate. Fortunately, the counselor inside was kind-hearted. They agreed to shelter the children. But the good times did not last long. Early the next morning, the consulate suddenly was flooded with injured foreign merchants and their families. Learning that they had been attacked by the White Lotus Sect, they had no choice but to seek refuge here. Wong Fei-hung immediately offered to help, using traditional Chinese medicine to treat the injured. It was also here that he met Sun Wen, an expert in Western medicine, Sun Yat-sen, and his wealthy companion Liu Haodong. The few of them combined their efforts, quickly stabilizing everyone's injuries. Later, through conversation, they learned that Sun Yat-sen and Liu Haodong were revolutionary patriots advocating for an equal democratic system and aiming to establish a republic government. Wong Fei-hung was deeply shocked upon hearing such ideas for the first time. Just as they were about to engage in deeper discussion, a rocket suddenly shot into the hall, followed by gunfire outside. The White Lotus Sect was attacking the consulate, and chaos erupted inside. With the situation so tense, Sun Yat-sen and Liu Haodong decided to act separately to ensure the safety of other revolutionaries in the provincial capital. Liu Haodong remained at the consulate to communicate with allies outside via telegram. Sun Yat-sen quickly left to inform others to hold back their actions for the time being. Later, with Wong Fei-hung's escort, Sun Yat-sen successfully left the consulate. However, as he departed, Nalin Yuanshu and his men arrived, stopping the rioters of the White Lotus Sect. Then, citing urgent matters, he stormed into the hall to arrest the criminals hiding there. It turned out that last night, Nalin Yuanshu received a telegram from Hong Kong spies claiming that someone was colluding with the Chaos Han Society in Hong Kong, planning to smuggle a batch of arms into Guangzhou to foment rebellion, with the leader being revolutionary Sun Yat-sen. Upon discovering that Sun Yat-sen had been frequently seen at the consulate recently, Nalin Yuanshu led his men to come and arrest him on the spot. But unexpectedly, the consulate's counselor appeared to stop them, claiming that this was British territory and that the court had no authority to enforce the law. Nalin Yuanshu knew that the counselor's protection of Sun Yat-sen was not good intention, but faced with the threat of foreign soldiers' rifles, he knew he was no match, so he could only suppress his anger and leave the consulate with his men. But how could the proud Nalin Yuanshu simply give up? To force the revolutionary patriots and foreigners into a dead end, he ordered all the power lines to be cut before leaving, severing all contact between the consulate and the outside world. To prevent the two sides from continuing to threaten the court, Nalin Yuanshu devised a plan. Since it was inconvenient to act openly in the name of the court, he secretly colluded with the White Lotus Sect. At night, he first ordered soldiers to fire at the gate to attract the guards' attention, then allowed members of the White Lotus Sect to sneak into the hall, intending to assassinate foreigners and capture Sun Yat-sen and his comrades. The plan proceeded as scheduled, and the White Lotus Sect successfully killed the foreign soldiers. But just as they were about to attack Liu Haodong, 13 Andy happened to appear, colliding with the White Lotus Sect members. In desperation, Wong Fei-hung had no choice but to act to protect everyone inside the hall, quickly knocking down several White Lotus Sect members. Soon after, another group of White Lotus Sect members stormed into the hall, riding horses and charging wildly. Wong Fei-hung reacted quickly upon seeing the situation. He immediately kicked one person off the horse, then mounted the horse himself, drew his broadsword, and beheaded another on the ground. The remaining followers saw Wong Fei-hung's skill. They were so frightened they turned to run, but were stopped by Liang Quan at the door, who tied them all together. At this moment, Nalin Yuanshu, who had been waiting outside for a long time, heard no movement inside the hall, so he led his troops in, feigning to take away some White Lotus followers for questioning, but in fact, he took the opportunity to release all of them. Unexpectedly, this scene was just seen by the counselor, who turned around and scolded Nalin Yuanshu for abusing his authority. But before he could finish speaking, Nalin Yuanshu suddenly twisted his neck, killing him instantly. When Wong Fei-hung learned of this, he immediately realized that everything was a scheme by Nalin Yuanshu. To protect Liu Haodong, Wong Fei-hung began to plan a breakout. First, he had his disciple Liang Quan pretend to be Liu Haodong to attract the attention of the soldiers. Then, he had An 13 disguise as a man, acting as the consulate's translator, to go out and inform Sun Yat-sen. Finally, Liu Haodong wrapped his head in gauze, pretending to be the injured Liang Quan, and followed behind him to pass through undetected. The two successfully deceived Nalin Yuanshu. Then, under the escort of the soldiers, they arrived at the White Lotus Sect's hideout, the Tian Temple. Because everything inside the temple was still unknown, Wong Fei-hung pretended to defect, lying that he wanted to join the White Lotus Sect and cooperated to complete the initiation ritual. To eradicate the White Lotus Sect that disturbed the people's order, Grand Master Wong Fei-hung pretended to defect and infiltrated the sect. Unexpectedly, everyone had already seen through his identity. They immediately rushed forward to attack him. Fortunately, Wong Fei-hung reacted swiftly, easily knocking down all those who approached with 2 moves. The followers were enraged. They charged again to deal with Wong Fei-hung, but he was no match for them, being knocked askew by his umbrella. Yet, even so, they did not give up, still chanting "Divine power protects the body," hoping for the protection of the true warrior emperor to be invulnerable to blades and guns, unharmed by water and fire. Seeing that the 9th Palace true man was delayed and did not appear, Wong Fei-hung leapt onto the altar, desperately destroying the offerings above. Unexpectedly, the followers, seeing Wong Fei-hung desecrating the true warrior emperor, unknowingly rushed forward again. Wong Fei-hung quickly responded with his umbrella, but even after it broke, he couldn't stop their assault. At this moment, Liu Haodong, hiding aside, stepped forward, pointing his gun at everyone. He told them there was no such thing as the true warrior emperor, that everything was fake. Although the followers still believed they could be protected by divine power, faced with guns, they hesitated. They dared not advance rashly. However, just as Liu Haodong thought his persuasion was effective, a little girl suddenly stepped out from the crowd. The believers' morale instantly soared. Then they charged forward fiercely once again. Seeing that Wong Fei-hung's group was stubbornly persistent, he had no choice but to quickly hide behind the altar with Liu Haodong. Witnessing the frenzied state of his compatriots, Liu Haodong's heart was filled with sorrow. But at this moment, Wong Fei-hung did not give up. Adhering to the principle of "if you can't beat them, join them," he suddenly had a clever idea, burst into a loud laugh, then jumped back onto the altar, wielding a weapon. He pretended to be possessed by the true warrior emperor and sought to meet the 9 Palace true person. This move stunned the crowd of believers. Just as they were at a loss, the 9 Palace true person finally appeared and invited Wong Fei-hung to his altar for a meeting. Wong Fei-hung, upon hearing this, immediately jumped onto the altar. He initially intended to reveal the true face of the 9 Palace true person publicly, but unexpectedly, although the believers were a rabble, the 9 Palace true person showed some real skills. The two fought dozens of rounds until the altar was battered and broken, yet neither could determine a winner. The 9 Palace true person, furious and defeated, immediately ordered the believers to set up the altar again with a barrier, then used the excuse of exorcising demons to turn against the heavens and the earth, aiming to eliminate Wong Fei-hung, who claimed to be the true warrior emperor. The two of them engaged in another fierce battle, but by this time, the Nine Palace true person was already flustered. After a few rounds, Wong Fei-hung seized an opening and kicked him off the high platform with a shadowless kick from Foshan. At this moment, Liu Haodong saw the Nine Palace true person fall to the ground and quickly drew his pistol to eliminate the threat. However, after firing several shots, the Nine Palace true person remained unharmed. Just as Liu Haodong was surprised, the Nine Palace true person was about to counterattack. Fortunately, at a critical moment, Wong Fei-hung stepped forward just in time, using a grappling hold to restrain the Nine Palace true person, then kicked him onto the statue's finger, killing him instantly. Subsequently, a piece of iron fell from the Nine Palace true person's body, and everyone finally understood. The so-called invulnerable to swords and spears divine skill was merely a trick of the Nine Palace true person. At this point, the absurd myth of this heretical cult was finally exposed. The believers, witnessing their revered leader being killed, suddenly felt their faith collapse and knelt to cry loudly. After dealing with the White Lotus Sect, Wong Fei-hung and his companions hurried to the Shaman Pier to meet Leung Kwan, who had been waiting for a long time. They initially planned to leave Guangzhou together with Sun Yat-sen and others, but unexpectedly, Liu Haodong suddenly remembered that their base in Guangzhou, Xianxiao Lane, still held several revolutionary records. To prevent these records from falling into the hands of the court and implicating their comrades, Liu Haodong decided to destroy all the records before leaving Guangzhou. With only 30 minutes before the ship departs, the three hurried back to Xianxiao Lane to retrieve the records. However, they encountered patrol soldiers. Before they could react, Liu Haodong was shot multiple times. Wong Fei-hung wanted to escape quickly, but Liu Haodong, knowing his life was about to end. In order not to hinder Wong Fei-hung, he decisively stayed behind and burned the roster, then had Wong Fei-hung and Leung Foon quickly escape with a token of proof. Wong Fei-hung took the token, and just as he felt regret for Liu Haodong, several soldiers rushed in to attack. Wong Fei-hung quickly countered, suddenly kicking out a wooden stick, but was caught by the arriving Nalan Yuanshu. This was the ultimate battle between Admiral Nalan Yuanshu and Grandmaster Wong Fei-hung, also the peak duel of the Four Doors Staff Technique and Shaolin Staff Technique. Wong Fei-hung was the first to strike, using a shadow-breaking staff move to instantly disarm Nalan Yuanshu. Seeing this, Nalan Yuanshu quickly countered with a fierce attack, breaking Wong Fei-hung's long staff and forcing him to retreat repeatedly. Seeing his offensive unstoppable, Wong Fei-hung leapt onto a high platform, drew a long staff, and engaged in a long-distance fight with Nalan Yuanshu. Due to limited space, Nalan Yuanshu soon fell behind. He tried to climb onto the high platform to fight Wong Fei-hung up close, but was sent to the top by Wong Fei-hung with a stick, and they exchanged positions. Wong Fei-hung's fierce attack forced Nalan Yuanshu into a dilemma. However, just then, Liu Haodong, who was desperately trying to burn the roster, could no longer hold on and died on the spot. Wong Fei-hung was struck with grief and anger. Immediately, Nalan Yuanshu seized the opportunity, knocking over the beams on the high platform, then leaping down with his staff, finally fighting Wong Fei-hung to a standstill. Both of them held each other's weaknesses at this point, and due to differing stances, they had no retreat. This was a life-or-death confrontation. Then, they once again engaged in fierce combat, each move deadly. Before long, they caused the high platform to collapse, and the scene was filled with dust. Because they still needed to find Sun Yat-sen to hand over the token, Wong Fei-hung planned to escape with Leung Foon amidst the chaos, but unexpectedly entered a dead end. Seeing this, they were about to turn back and look for another route, but Nalan Yuanshu caught up again. With time running out, Wong Fei-hung had no choice but to decide on a desperate fight. At this moment, Nalan Yuanshu threw out a piece of cloth, preparing to use his ultimate move, the cloth staff. Then both sides once again engaged in battle. To Wong Fei-hung's surprise, the power of Nalan Yuanshu's cloth staff was so great that it could punch a hole through a stone wall. Seeing this, Wong Fei-hung quickly ordered Leung Foon to advance, using the power of the cloth staff to continue breaking through the stone wall to create an escape route. However, just as the hole in the wall was large enough for a person to pass through, Nalan Yuanshu reacted swiftly and struck Leung Foon, causing him to bleed from the mouth. Seeing his disciple injured, Wong Fei-hung was instantly furious, then pressed his foot down on Nalan Yuanshu's cloth staff. Seizing his opponent's moment of shock, he followed with a shadowless kick, forcing Nalan Yuanshu to retreat repeatedly. But how could Nalan Yuanshu easily admit defeat? Then he once again swung out the cloth staff. He tightly wrapped his arms around Wong Fei-hung's neck, intending to strangle him. But he never expected that this would give Wong Fei-hung an opportunity. Wong Fei-hung used the sharpness of a broken bamboo to split a cloth stick in two, then directly cut Nilin Yuanshu's neck, causing blood to spurt out. The duel finally came to an end. Afterwards, Wong Fei-hung helped Leung Kwan hurriedly head to the dock, but they still arrived a step too late. Watching the boat drift farther away, Wong Fei-hung desperately threw the token entrusted to Liu Haodong onto the deck. Sun Yat-sen took it and opened it. It was a flag symbolizing freedom and equality. Although this operation failed, as long as the revolutionary spirit remains in people's hearts, the ideal will eventually become reality one day. The movie ends here. That concludes this episode's content. For more classic films, see you next time.